Welcome to the Biz Buy Lab today. We are here with Delia, and we are going to talk about the red flags when you buy your first, second, third business that you don't even know about or see until maybe 2 weeks after you buy the business. So, Delia, you're going to share some stories. I know that you've had some experience with stuff that went down maybe a little bit in flames that you didn't realize to look for ahead of time. Can you share some of those top tips with us to look for?
Yeah, one of the first red flags I want to highlight is the fact that working capital often takes longer than modeled. So when it comes to buying a business, especially a service business, there is the risk of running out of cash before running out of customers. You often have to pay your people, you have to pay staff, you have to absorb the labor cost. You deliver the service, and very often, especially with commercial services, you get paid 45 to 60 days later. Now, for someone who's run the business for a long, long time, they've ran the business debt free for 10 years, they probably never felt that squeeze of having to pay everyone and then wait 45 to 60 days. In one of the businesses we bought, everyone was supposed to pay us within 30 days. And still that was a bit challenging because we didn't plan really well for it. But we discovered after buying it that people were taking 45 to 60 days, and we had a few customers who paid us like 4 months later.
Okay.
Now, I would add that we also were trying to figure out the business, and we didn't really have a person who was handling it. I assume we would have been able to maybe get some of that money faster. In a second business we bought, um, people didn't really care about net terms. They're like, it's about 30 days. And when we get a check, day 33, maybe they would mail a check. It would take another 2 days for us to get the check, then process it. So that adds up, right? When you add 5 to 7 to 10 days and you're planning on getting the money, you absorb all the costs, you have the overhead, that can really make it difficult for people. Now, when it comes to the risk tolerance, some people cannot handle that. And if you have never had, 15,000, 100,000, $500,000 in debt, this could be a real big problem. So you have to ask yourself if you can handle that before you go into the business.
Do you recommend having a certain number of months in capital ready to go to kind of float some of that while you're waiting? Or are you, as a person, pretty risk tolerant?
Yeah, that would be ideal, right? To have capital for 60 days. And when you do an SBA loan, you can ask for working capital. But if you have the money, that would be ideal to always have 60 days. Even 30 days helps a ton because you're going to have some customers that pay you upfront or cash on delivery. So yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah. What would be some like key questions as far as to know, okay, the business owner might tell you, yeah, everyone is supposed to pay in 30 days, but really it comes in 45 or 60 days. How do you get past their sheen on the situation? What would be something you'd ask ahead of time?
Yeah, you should ask the right questions when it comes to buying a business. You're going to put a lot of money down. So ask really the right questions. How many days between you delivering the service and collecting cash from the customers? And then a second question is, do people pay on time if they're on net terms? In one of the businesses, actually, the last couple of weeks, we've had this issue where they're on net 10, so they have 10 days to pay, but they receive the invoice. Someone has to review it. They supposedly have 3 days to review it, and then they submit it to the purchasing department, and then the purchasing department starts the 10-day clock. So the 10 days turns into 15 to 20 days because that's their process. So ask the specific questions like, do people actually pay within the net term days or not? Why not? You're going to have to float that gap, and you need to know before you get into the business. Now, most of the sellers who are good sellers are going to be honest. So you want to also ask questions, but then see if you can uncover that from the numbers, from the financial reports, because you can ask for a cash flow report. Most QuickBooks users can easily get you a cash flow report. So see if the story actually complements the numbers that you're reading from your cash flow reports.
Okay. Has this scenario ever happened to you before where you've just kind of had to figure out what to do at the last minute with that
Yes,
gap?
I've had a few times where in one of the service businesses we bought, we made tons of money for what we needed to pay. We had money supposedly, but they were not in our hands. And I had to pay the payroll one week and I did not have the money. So it was very stressful for about 60 days while I figure out a solution. And that's why I'm starting with this because it can put a lot of stress on a new business owner who is already handling so many new things. The first 90 days are pretty chaotic in some ways, even if it's a great business, because you're learning so much. There's so much, it feels like a water hose, like you're just trying to, yeah, deal with everything else. So this is a pretty big question to ask.
Yeah, no, that's great to know. What is another red flag that you've run across?
Yeah, a huge thing with service businesses is the issue of buying the person, not the business. So the business owner is actually makes up the business. I was talking to a commercial service business last week, and he's interested in selling. And he said, everyone who calls us asks for Henry. Henry is his business partner. And a lot of times when it comes to service businesses, the customers stay because of that business owner, because of that main service manager. So you have to uncover that type of issue because if you lose customers once the person leaves, that's going to really hurt your bottom line. And it's a really easy mistake to make because again, it's not a type of due diligence question that comes up when you look at the numbers. You have to ask questions. How loyal are their customers? Are they loyal to the technicians, the business owner? In that, that's a like a really good question, and it's why the value of the business is a lot lower when the business owner is really involved into the business. So that's one of the ways we evaluate businesses. If a business owner is valuable to the business, the value goes down because you remove the business owner, then you have an issue you have to solve. However, a lot of times people forget to also ask, is there a second-hand person or another person who is as valuable as the business owner? And you uncover it by asking questions.
Is it worth walking away in that type of business if you find out the owner has such tight, close connections with all of his main clients? Or is it worth taking the time to see if you can build those relationships? At what point do you think it's more hassle than it's worth?
Yeah, those are all great questions, and it depends who the buyer is. It depends on um, how much money you have, whether you want to be in industry for a long time, how well you connect to the seller, because the seller can be your mentor and can teach you, right, to take over this. In one of the videos I created for our channel and our community, the 17 hat theory, I mentioned that most business owners can carry three hats out of the 17 hats being all the different roles in a business. And if the seller has three hats that are very different than your three strengths, three hats, then you have to figure out, do I need to put someone else in place? Are those hats not as essential at this point in the stage of the business? So there are other questions you have to ask as a buyer, but really at the end of the day, it could be a good deal because you can learn some of these things, but is the seller willing to mentor you? A lot of times when the sellers are retiring, they are more open to doing that because they care about their legacy, they care about helping the buyer. And then if you are willing to, right, take over that role and learn it, then you're going to pay a little less for the business. So there are some benefits because again, the value of the business is tied to how involved the business owner is in the business. So there are some benefits to still take it on, but you have to do it consciously. Like you have to make that decision and you have to realize the issue I'm going to have to take care of. Am I willing to work through these issues? And the other option is, right, to find a team that's running a business and pay more for the team, but then you have fewer headaches potentially.
Yeah. Right. Or more. Is there
Yeah,
any
yeah.
other last minute questions you'd think to ask to look ahead of time other than just some of those general observations as far as
Yeah, I would ask a question like, when was the last time you stepped away for 2 weeks or for 30 days? Did you ever step away from the business for 2 weeks or 30 days? If they've never stepped away, then you have a business where the owner is pretty essential to the day-to-day operations. You can also ask a simple question like, what percentage of customers or what percentage of revenue comes from customers who have your personal cell phone number? That
yeah.
could be, right, an interesting question. Do the customers communicate with the owner via cell phone, via text messaging? Also, who owns the customer relationships today? Those
Mhm.
are good questions to uncover. And some of these things, the seller won't like share with you necessarily. They might not even realize it, that the whole business, I mean, they know it, but they might not realize it, how essential they are to the running of the business. And these questions are intended to gather as much information so that you form a realistic picture of what's going on in the business.
Yeah, those are great questions, great tips. Another one, do you have another red flag that you've encountered?
Yeah, red flag number three, complexity is not a moat, is not a protection around the business. So in the
Okay.
past, I think I might have thought that a complex business is harder to remove, right? Competitors have a harder time getting into the industry. However, complexity adds fragility. Anytime you have a lot of parts in a system, if one part breaks down, the whole system breaks down. So a business that's complex, it's actually harder to run. And it's not true that is necessarily harder to break. Um, because we tend to think, oh, it's going to be so easy to be the only business in this industry or to continue to be the top business in this industry because it's hard for people to learn. So I would just tell people, look at the complexity. If it's a complex business, you're going to spend more time in it. You're going to have a harder time learning everything. I bought a print shop with my friend who was a business partner in the Amazon business. And we realized the print shop world is very complex. After we had a conversation with a mastermind owner, a person who has helped many print shop owners improve their businesses, he made this comment. After restaurants, print shops are probably the hardest businesses to run in terms of complexity. We did not know that when we bought the business. But we discovered it because there are so many types of stock and so many types of uh, jobs, so many different types of printing styles. And when you're a print shop, a lot of customers just come with you with everything, whether it's a promotional, whether it's screen printing, whether it's a booklet or a banner or a sticker, or, we could go on all day, packaging. Uh, there's so many different ways. And what does that mean? Training people is harder because you have complexity. If one pillar in the business breaks down, the whole business can break down. So complexity is not a moat, is not a protection. um, I would question people to consider, can I handle this type of complexity? If it's not an industry you've been in, you have to ask that type of question.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you recommend only doing a complex type business if you've worked in that industry before, or just at least be aware of how much you're going to have to learn when you start out?
Yeah, all of these questions, have an answer of like, it depends on who you are. That's why we focus so much on the business buyer fit. It depends on who you are as a buyer. Complexity makes it harder. I probably wouldn't start with a complex business on my first business if I could go back because I had for a while I had two businesses. One was complex in terms of operation. One was simple, And I love the simplicity. Now, of course, we had many challenges with employees and making sure they're trained, but it was so much simpler. And with the complex business, the print shop, we also have hundreds of vendors we work with. In the simple service business that where the service is pretty simple, less complex, we have maybe three or four vendors that cover all of our things we need to run the business. So it just makes it so much easier. You probably need fewer people on the admin stuff, the customer support side. So yeah, it depends on who the person is. I would probably start with a simpler service if I were to go back.
You mentioned when you bought the print business, you didn't know how complex it was. Looking back, what types of questions would you have asked to figure out how difficult, the operating procedures might be? Something that would give you a
Yeah, it's a good question. Just ask about the day-to-day operations and what are the types of products or services that you sell. And that question will probably uncover whether it's a complex, because if people stop and have to think about all the types of products they or services they sell, that means it's pretty complex. Um, we sell probably hundreds of types of printed materials and items. That means each type of printing process comes with its own, complexities. So I would have, yeah, just ask what's the most challenging thing in this business. Sometimes you can uncover the complexity issue by asking that question, but not just the owner. You want to be able to ask that question of other people, either in the business or outside of that specific business.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. All right, I love these. Keep them coming. What's the next red flag you've got for us?
Okay, red flag number four. The hardest thing to fix in a business after you buy is probably not the finances, it's the team. When I talked to a friend who was hired by Fortune 500 companies to turn businesses around, he said that whenever he was sent to a location, he would fire 50% of the people because a culture that is not good is very difficult to change. So when you're buying a business, you really want to uncover the culture that you're buying. That it takes a year to 2 years probably to change the culture in a business. So in a prior business that a friend of mine was managing, he mentioned how the employees have sued the owner a couple of times. And that happened, he said, he bought that business and he said, I've never had this issue before. It was a culture issue, right? Someone started it. There were some guys in that business that were not good guys, and one guy, right, won something out of that lawsuit. So they figured, oh, we can all earn something. It's a culture issue. The type of people that were attracted, the type of people that shared what one did and led to all of these other guys going that route. And it was very difficult to change. So that's an example where it can hurt you right away. But it could also be a culture of laziness or not attention to detail, not caring for the customer. There could be so many different things that you are not going to uncover on paper. You have to have some conversations with people.
Yeah.
And
Other
yeah, I do feel like that's probably the hardest thing to fix.
I was gonna say, even to discover maybe, how common is it to just be able to even kind of interview some of the current employees to kind of get a feel for the culture?
Yeah,
Even
you there are
collaborate?
steps. Yeah, in the process of buying a business, you should have the ability to interview some employees, but it will probably be later on in the process. It's not going to be prior to submitting a letter of intent because the seller cannot have 100 potential buyers interview their team. So it's something you should require and ask for, but it has to happen later on in the process. When you're really serious, you've already submitted a letter of intent. The seller sees that okay, we're moving forward. You have the ability to buy this business if you want to buy it. It's just a matter of asking the right questions to make sure the price is right. So yeah, you can certainly interview employees, and you should. But it's harder, right, when you're trying to make that decision and you don't have that information. But listen to what employees say. And it's ideal if you can interview the employees without the owner being there. And just ask random questions about the business and see what they say.
Yeah, see if it lines up. Is there any other questions that you'd ask ahead of time that you could think of? Any specific things that might help? Um,
Yeah, one thing that's very interesting to me is to find questions that would uncover whether the team is open to changes.
okay.
Um, and in our day and age, it could be as simple as, "Hey, you've ever used AI? Would you be open to using AI?" If everyone is really against any type of change, that means you have your like a really hard journey ahead of you to improve the business. Because every business has leaks and problems and issues, even if they're very profitable and they're good businesses. And if your intention is to grow it, you will have to make some changes. Now, I do not recommend you make any changes in the first 60 to 90 days, but you need to see, are these people at least open to making changes? And there are questions you can ask along those ways. And how many times did they change software, or how did it look like? Those are the types of questions. Um, what type of performance review records do they have? Can you look at them? When did you last let someone go because of performance? Those types of questions will uncover whether the business cares about performance, or there's maybe a huge cultural issue that you'll have to work through.
Yeah. Have you ever purchased a business and inherited employees that had bad team morale or practices that they weren't following through with procedures or anything like that where it was just a surprise
Yes.
afterwards?
Yes, yes. I wish I didn't, but I I think that happens a lot in one business. And I'm keeping it general because, some of these businesses we might still have. But in one business, we bought the business, and the employees, at least a handful of them, have lied repeatedly. We discovered over the course of 3 to 4 months. And I'm thankful, that we were able to discover it, but sometimes it takes a while. And it's hard when you don't trust your employees to do anything. It was very difficult to uncover those issues. But we would ask questions all the time and try to see if there are differences but very, very lightly, not just in passing, just talking to them. I would throw a question or two about what happened that night or how did things turn out. And I would try to match the answers from team member number one, team member number two. It's always very difficult for people to hide the truth if they're lying, if you ask a lot of questions. So if I could give any type of advice to all the new business buyers, is become really good at asking questions, but not threatening questions, just asking good questions. And that's an amazing skill. You uncover so much. I guess that's like the whole idea behind what we're talking about. If you want to discover red flags, you have to ask questions of the owner, of the employees, of anyone who has prepared the documents for the selling of the business. Just ask a lot of questions and become better at asking questions. And I think you will uncover a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Have you ever asked questions of maybe some what would be considered lower level employees as far as not, the CEO, VP or whatever, that just gives any insight into that, any red flags?
It's actually red flag number four. Very often, the lowest paid employees know more than the highest paid advisors you pay to review documents and contracts and disclosures and help you make a decision. Because when you have conversations with the employees who are involved in the day-to-day operation, they know if something illegal or something wrong or something, maybe not completely wrong, but something, if corners are cut, they know. There's you're not going to have a line on the P&L that talks about, improper disposal of uh, materials or chemicals. You're not going to have a line for, uh, any type of fraud, let's say workers' comp fraud or billing fraud. If there are safety shortcuts that a company is taking, usually the employees who are in the day-to-day operations would know. Are they doing any unlicensed work? Are there customer complaints that are undisclosed? Usually the people working the day to day know about that. So that's why the more you can talk to employees as before signing the documents, the better. It's not always easy, right? But if you get to a point where you're ready to sign the papers, you should within, a month before signing have some conversations. You want direct employee access without the owner being present.
Yeah.
And again, ask simple questions, just like, "Hey, what would you change?" Or "Is there something that you don't like?" It doesn't have to be threatening. Like, "Are you doing anything illegal?" No one's gonna say yes to it. So you have to first uncover what could be done in the business that's illegal.
Mhm.
Let's say in the Medicare billing, health billing world, there are many things that could be fraudulent in any type of cleaning businesses, service businesses. There are issues with like not following EPA standards, environmental laws. So each type of service business industry, right, would have its own potential for fraud and issues. So that's why you have to first understand what could be potential issues and what kind of questions are non-threatening to uncover it.
The thing that I'm noticing is picking up on how to ask good questions of both the business owner and the employees, and hopefully some of these red flags will just come popping out.
Yeah, and
So,
that's one of the reasons we want to build a community where people can talk to each other. There might be things I cannot reveal publicly, right, about things I've uncovered in my businesses. I can give general advice, but it's
mhm.
important to be around people who are buying and selling businesses and have those conversations, build those relationships, and you can learn a lot from each other. But yes, at the end of the day, you have to become better at asking questions, and that's how you can avoid most of these red flags. That's how you can walk away from the bad deals.
Yeah, no, that is awesome advice. Thanks so much for sharing these tips today. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on Biz by Lab. If you're looking for more help in buying your first business, hit the subscribe button.